fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of the Vernon Stars Podcast 4th season. My loyal listeners, thank you for team support. It's an amazing episode because Braxton Cosby boards the mothership to discuss Broken Book 1 of the Young Hellion series. Now, come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Cosby. Thank you for coming to the Traversing Stars Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Totally my pleasure. So, I always start off with the question of inspiration. So, what inspired your love for writing and who are your earliest influences?
My earliest influences, back when I went to school, I don't know if you had the same experience. They kind of told us what to read. We had like
Yeah.
required reading, and that was all the way from elementary through middle school and high school. We didn't really get to choose, so it was like these are the classics, read them. And so I can remember, man, and these stories just are emblazed in my head. I can't even get them out. Like To Build a Fire, these boring stories. Silas Marner. I mean, it
Yeah.
was like these things. Like it was totally over my head. There was no characters that I could relate to, nothing familiar, even about the settings and things like that. And so I found myself just kind of really hating reading. To be honest, it was boring uh, for all those reasons I said before. And so the one book that stood out to me that I actually had a chance to read was Fahrenheit 451, which ironically was about burning books. So, but I just found it intriguing because it was so off the cuff, and different from what I was being made to read. So I was intrigued by it, and I was like, "Well, what's this genre?" And they were like, "It's science fiction, kind of dystopian." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." I didn't really know what it was, and then so um, that was my early experience with science fiction, kind of my introduction. And of course, then the things like Star Wars and Star Trek came around, and then there was the one TV show that finally came on because I did look at the old version of Battlestar Galactica, which was great. But sci-fi really got embedded in my mind once Farscape came out. Because I was obviously, most kids are Jim Henson fans. And I heard that Jim Henson was doing this whole sci-fi show and it was on the Sci-Fi Network and everything was kind of exciting because of it. So I just watched it and I just fell in love with sci-fi after that. And then beyond that, I just started really kind of just digging in, looking at a lot more movies than I read books. And it wasn't until 2010 where I was actually at church one day and our pastor was preaching. He was like, I feel like God is talking to some people out there in the pews about doing some stuff that they never really did before in their life, but nobody's really asking. And I remember just asking God, well, what would you want me to do? And I just heard the voice say, like, write a book. And I had no idea what that meant. So I remember kind of thinking of what a plot would be for a story that I never even thought of writing. And I remember kind of heard another voice saying, well, all those things that you saw in movies that you liked, how sometimes you might look at a movie and you're like, man, that movie was really good, but I wish they had done this with it or
Yeah.
done that. It would be really cool. It said, put all those things in your own story. And I was like, okay, I could do that. So then I went on this research binge trying to figure out how to write, what it takes, how to get an agent and all that good stuff. And lo and behold, after writing a 90,000 word novel and then getting it submitted and getting picked up by one publisher, that publisher going under, then another publisher picking it back up. And then that publisher, I was on the second issue, the second book of the series, and that was for the Star-Crossed Saga, young adult science fiction. My first book actually won a Book of the Year award for science fiction romance with readers' favorites. So that was like, I was like, great. Okay, I got some momentum. And then we just started clashing, me and the publisher, on the some elements with the second book. And I just asked for my rights back. And then I said I was just going to do it myself. So 2014, Cosby Media Productions was born. Since then, we've signed over 30 different authors with 60 titles in ebook, audiobook, paperback, spanning from anywhere from self-help to religious stories, spiritual, wellness, and science fiction, fantasy, superhero, LGBTQ, you name it. If it's inspirational, I feel like it speaks to a genre that people are going to dig and love and enjoy. We approve them. So we've never put out an open call for submissions, and we just always get people just coming saying, "Hey, my friend got published by you guys, and they really liked the experience. I want to know if you'd be interested." And then they submit, give us the first 3 chapters, the synopsis of the story. If it's different and it's unique, we have an interview, a formal interview to talk about some things, and after that, we sign them. So It's been great. Since 2021. We started our own comic book imprint, so we've expanded a little bit with Star Child Comics. And since then, we've published 12 comics. We've got number 13 coming out in December, December 17th, which is my baby, Cape issue 2 of the Cape series. Cape Hellfire was issue 1, and Cape 2 is the Fabulous 5, which is another kind of a young group that's going to be joining the fold of the Cape. So I'm really excited. I thought the story came out amazing. The art is fabulous. Marcelo Salazar did an amazing job on it. So I'm really, really anxious to get that out and get to these conventions and get people picking up the book.
So, I mean, I think that's one thing that's fascinating about you is that you're a writer who searched for a publisher. Now you're a publisher as well. So, what did the experience of being a writer, either searching for a publisher, working for the publisher, help inspire you, or help teach you what to do when you're a publisher, and how then being the writer helps you to know, let's say, how to either work with other writers or how to envision what kind of writers you want for your publishing company.
Right. What we wanted to do with Cosby Media Productions, honestly, was just to be a partner for writers. We didn't want to just kind of come into the industry and just take all the royalties and make artists, authors pay for certain services and things like that. We didn't want to be vanity publishing. We really didn't want to be publishing, but because I'm an author and I know some of the things and the struggles that go into publishing and releasing your book, I wanted to do the best I could to get these things out, make sure that, for one, the covers looked great. I want an industry standard for everything: covers, formatting, editing as much as possible. We're small press, so we do have a small handful of editors that we work with. So we try to do the best that we can, but obviously we don't have the great technology and all that the larger houses do. But we do our best to make sure that the books are experiences that people can read, they can get into. And we always look also at series potential, because we want people to be able to say, "Oh, I really like that one. What's next?" So I know they're looking for the next book from that author, and hopefully it's in the series of books that they're writing. So our royalty rates are very competitive with the industry, and we give authors quite a bit. We give them book trailers, we give them cover reveals, and I just feel like there's some things in the industry that, even as I was published by other people, I've been published by 3 publishing companies, they didn't even do, and we still offer. So I really want to put in the work to make sure that if we're going to release a book, I want to give the author the opportunity to be as successful as they can in their endeavor of publishing, because I don't want people to just put a book out just to say they're published. I want them to be successful as well.
Now, one of the books that you have coming out recently is called Broken, Book One of the Young Hellion series. So
Yes,
it sounds like I got to read synopsis. It sounds absolutely fascinating.
thank you.
When you're doing a new, once again, I know you do comic books, you're doing other novels. You've done also some nonfiction stuff as well. When you thought about Broken, how did you think in terms of how does this book challenge you in ways that maybe other projects didn't?
Yeah, this my challenge personally, as always, after writing 20 novels, was I want my next book to be my most favorite book. So there's always a challenge for me to say, what can I do differently this time around? How much can I take some feedback from other people who have read my stuff and said, oh, he kind of did this and that. How can I improve on that? And how can I make the story even more powerful going forward? What are the elements that may be missing? What else can I add? How can I learn, uh, pick up a couple of more courses on writing, some other little techniques that I could add to just build that character up so much that people get attached to them? Well, this one really stretched me because it was a female protagonist I had never written before. I had Sydney in the Starcross saga, but I wrote Starcross saga in a third person narrative. So it was really kind of like a narration of all the characters. So yes, Sydney's character was very powerful. She was strong. She was bent, bruised, stretched, and she came out amazing after the trilogy was done. But that was coinciding with William's journey too, her love interest. So that wasn't as much as this one, where I'm actually in the mind of a young female. So I thought about my daughters, you know, the oldest, the middle, and the youngest, trying to combine all of their personalities into this one character who is strong, but also challenged by being a 16-year-old girl when all the events of Broken take place. And how can I just continue to stretch her And then I also put a little bit of mental health in there as well, because that's something that's very present in our current times right now, where people are really struggling with things. So I wanted to put all those components in there, and of course, give her a love interest as well. And she serves as this surrogate parent to her younger brother Kieran, because they've been abandoned after the all-out nuclear war on planet Earth, where everybody's just been decimated, and now she's got to pick up the pieces, being a slave of one of the slave pods by the establishment, because money is no longer a currency anymore. Basically, humans are currency, so they trade people, and it's based on a class system. So I wanted to kind of just get in her mind, what are the things she's going through, how is she being challenged, and the bleakness of everything that she's going through, what inspires her to go on. And I felt like that was successful in capturing that, because everything is outside of her. Nothing pulled her internally to continue the fight. It was always these responsibilities. So she really does grow quite a bit. Broken was from inception a series that I wanted to make special. So because with Cosby Media Productions / Star Child Comics, we feel like we're a hybrid publisher. We give people opportunities to read books in both novel and comic book formats. So I wanted Broken to represent that. So book one is the novel, 350-page novel. Book two ended up being the comic book. So our first issue of the comic book for the Broken series is book two in the series. Book three is the graphic novel, which I just pretty much launched now. We had a successful Kickstarter to get that done. And so that was a 60-page graphic novel. So I'm really, really excited and pleased how that came out, because I answered like a lot of the questions that were left after the comic book and the novel. So I got a really good chance to kind of address the mental health challenges that Kisa had through those two books and the graphic novel. And I just feel like the entire journey has just been great for me, because this is honestly some of the best writing I've done in my mind personally, because of how much I've stretched and really pulled, not just with the world building and the secondary characters that Kisa is connected to, but really just the challenge that she has had personally.
Now, one interesting thing about Broken is that there are definitely some allegorical qualities to the world of Broken. I mean, you're dealing with issues connected to slavery, your issues connected to nuclear fallout, basically the world economy. So how do you balance messaging or in the allegory with the momentum of the story and the character development?
Yeah, the good thing about the way that we create these stories with building first out of novels, that you can just kind of run with novels. You can go on and on. You can write 100,000 words or 50,000 words, whatever you like. So I got a great chance to really give a good foundation about the character of Kisa and the people around her, her support system, those trying to bring her down, and then the main villains within the establishment, who are trying to not only control the world, but also have a vested interest in her, because they kind of see that there's something different about her. And so there's another group of people. When you ingest the nuclear fallout, you can go one of three ways. You can either become what we call like the Walking Dead. We call them ashers, mindless zombies, who do operate a little bit differently from like the traditional Walking Dead, because they are fast and they work in hordes and packs, and they have a leader. So it's very different from some of the other zombie stories you might have read or watched. Also, you can become a hoarder, which is you kind of go a little bit wild, kind of like the Mad Max kind of characters, and they just ravage the land and pillage it for resources and things like that. So they have their own networking system, and I really dove into them heavy in the novel. So when it came down to the comic book, because the ashes were kind of left out a little bit, I was like, here's an opportunity to really like, bam, throw some great action sequences so we can kind of show off these ashers and show Kisa's skill set, her social proof of how she can fight with these knives that her father taught her to throw and when she was a little girl. And then also, obviously, the establishment is the big conglomerate corporation that's kind of taken over everything, kind of the evil empire. And the main person that she has to deal with is the magistrate named Crace, who's trying to elevate himself within the ranks. But he's also very intrigued with her, because there's rumors about people who, I mean, like 1% of the population who survive, who ingest the ashes, and they actually have special ESP that's released in them, where they can have visions and dreams. And they're called alphas. And of course, with Kisa being the main character, you can suspect that she's one of those. So uh, I think balancing all of that was really heavy in the comic book, I mean, in the novel. And then when I got to the comic, it's a little bit faster, even though I still use 3 act structure to write in all of my writings. I do it for my screenplays, my comic scripts, and my novels. The pacing can be a little bit faster because it's more of a visual medium. And I still want to put, like in the graphic novel, I want to put the world on display, really the world building. So there's a lot of time in the outside world now that we can really just kind of see what this landscape looks like. And it's a reflection of Kisa, very much so in the way that she's trying to grow and advance while she's struggling. It's almost like there's a dichotomy of her trying to heal along with the world trying to heal as well. So you get that in the graphic novel.
I think it's kind of interesting that once again, being an alpha for Kisa, she has the ESP. Now, I know there's like, especially when you're younger, you always think every superpower is a gift and everything's wonderful. Is ESP more of a gift or a curse for her?
Right. Initially, obviously, you imagine you don't know what's going on. You just keep having these dreams and visions. You have no idea what it means. So yes, it's a curse in the beginning, but she is still seeking truth behind that, even up through the graphic novel. So a lot of the mystery behind it has not been resolved. Although there's been the hints that hey, this is what's going on, and but she's got to get somewhere in order to find out the truth. So that's what we're still trying to take her along this journey so that she may. I always think about I think, the search for the golden fleece is kind of a theme in writing. You go on a quest to find one thing, but you find something else. So I'm trying to stay persistent with that about Kisa. She's seeking freedom, the truth about her parents' disappearance and all that, but she's finding out something else along the way. So those little Easter eggs are continuing to be woven into the story, and I think that's what's making such a great tale because it's one of my favorite stories as it is now.
And the other thing is with having the ESP that she's having these visions of of the future. Now, the visions that she's having are those the things that are propelling her forward, and then connected to that, is her destiny then already written, or these visions of what could be happening in the future?
The majority of what she's seeing is what is happening as it goes. The end game has not been revealed yet with her ESP. So it's more like a shadow of things to come. Yeah. And she's trying to put the pieces together, but until she gets to this one place, she won't know.
So, from you as a writer, how much control does she have in her life right now?
I would say probably she doesn't have as much as she thinks. And that's kind of shown in the graphic novel. She really and that's the thing about writing in the second act of a story, it's always about success shortfall. You think you got there, but then there's a shortfall. You got to kind of figure it back out and climb back up again, choose to climb back up again. And I think that's what I'm really continuing to work on with Kisa. She's getting so close and then the door is slammed in her face, and that's really what keeps the reader motivated to continue on the journey with the character.
And because she can't be the only alpha in the world, as you mentioned, there's others.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very stratified society, okay? As you mentioned, with Ashers and everybody else. Where do those with ESP exist within this stratification of society? Are they all good people trying to fight? Are they people who tend to have the upper hand and so they're unvillainy? So where does those with others alphas exist within this stratification?
You've done a great job at picking apart the issue that goes on here, right? Because I think that's when I wrote the Cape, my superhero series, that was it. It was like a ethical dilemma, a moral dilemma story. If one day people who got caught in a storm wake up the next day with superpowers, what do they do with that? It might be some people who had a tendency to do evil things and now they've got superpowers. This wasn't a respect of persons. It wasn't like all the good people got powers. It was anybody. So I think that's the question is like, okay, everybody gets ESP. What are they using it for? And I think while we go into the fourth book of the series, which is going to end up being a novella, that's what we're going to see. We're going to see that balance of, oh, wow, okay, now we're getting some other alpha. Oh, this is what this can go to. And I think people will really like that to kind of say, man, this is what happens when the wrong people get this kind of a gift, you know?
Mm. And another thing that's mentioned in Solicit is something called the Reckoning. So what is the
Right.
Reckoning, and what's the impact on that on Kisa?
Yeah, the reckoning was in the beginning of the novel. So the reckoning, it's the day of the reckoning, and it comes, you get chosen, and in that reckoning, you know, they basically it's the way to keep the slaves under control. You get selected, and you basically have to go up on stage, and one of the elder slaves who's older, you have to basically chop their head off. And so she has failed at this one time already. She tried, she fainted, she passed out, and she actually had a little bit of that vision kind of coming, didn't know what it was. And so she's been reselected again to do it. And they're saying this time, if you don't do it, then you're going to be the one who's on the chopping block, you know? So she's been dreading this day. The slaves and the slave power are given jobs. So they have, like I said, it's a class system. So you have something to do to keep the camp running. And so she's doing her shift, finishes up, and she knows this is the day of the reckoning. And this is where the inciting incident comes along, where basically Kisa's going to decide to go on the journey or not, you know. And so once that happens, then immediately we're in Act Two, and we're just kind of rolling with the storyline.
The other thing is, once again, there's a nuclear fallout, which is called the Big Drop in the series. Um, After the major nuclear fallout, and obviously governments of the world as we understand them are gone, for at least how we understand them right now, because nuclear fallout.
Right.
It's kind of how it goes. So which entity is, I don't know the right word, is in charge, or at least predominant, and what is the vision of what the world looks like from whoever the predominant group is?
Yeah, it's the establishment right now because obviously they're the ones they're like a military conglomerate. So they've got weapons, they've got technology, they've got all these things. Now, there are pockets of people out there in the world who are trying to gain the respect of the establishment. Like, hey, we're scientists, we're over here doing this. If we can be successful in this, then maybe we can get the establishment to acknowledge us and bring us into the fold. So everybody's trying to leverage their own weight because you know if you don't have money, the next thing that people want is power. And so they're trying to figure out how they can get powerful. And we actually see that introduced in the graphic novel. And then we see how it ends up. You know, how this story has to go one way or the other. And based on the desire of those characters, along with Kisa being thrown into the fold, it has a really, really interesting twist to it. And so the establishment is worldwide. So they have all these little colonies. We call them districts, well, precincts. And those precincts are continuing to communicate with each other. And based on where you are, this story takes place in the southeast, but there is a Midwest area where Grace eventually wants to be become a judge, and that's the highest ranking of the people who are on the lower end of the tier of control. So I would say that the establishment does have an upper hand, but we really get a good view of the life and the intricacies of the hoarders in the novel, where I think people will be like, wow, you know, this is really interesting. I thought they were just these mindless folks, but they actually have a nice community that they've built based on their limitations. So I think people get a little bit of everything in here. And then there's also, you know, there's more story to be told about the Ashers as well.
Now, since the story has been told, or will be getting told, in the form of a novel, form of a comic book, form of a graphic novel, and the form of a novella, how does looking at the concept and the idea and the world through these different medium or either change how you thought about the story, how you envision the story, and how does it allow you to express different aspects of yourself and the story by giving these other mediums?
Yeah, I think it gives me a chance to go a little wild with my imagination. You know, I mean, obviously the novel, I'm building up this world, and then people will read it, and they'll actually, I mean, they see what Kisa looks like on the cover, but they kind of have an idea of how the other characters look. You know, just based on descriptions. In the comic, now we're able to I can write out the description for the artist. The artist can actually bring all these characters to life the way I see them. And so now they can really connect with that. And of course, they can actually see the world itself building out. I made sure that with Broken being a very emotional story, we were very intentional about a lot of the imagery in the panels of these close-up shots of the characters. I wanted things to be really close, where you can see the pain, the agony, the stress, the anxiety in their eyes and in their emotions. So I kept that same emotional feel throughout the comic and the graphic novel because I feel like that was in the forefront. I mean, you imagine this is a very stressful story, one that is dystopian, so there's not a lot of hope. And these characters are constantly being batted around and challenged to survive.
So for our listeners, how do they get a hold of a copy of Broken?
Oh, they could easily just go over to the website. Everything that they want and need about Braxton Cosby is at the website. Even though I'm the CEO, I also sell everything through CosbyMediaProductions.com. That's productions with an S. They can also, it's easy to navigate. You can scroll down in the center of the website. You'll see all of our genres that we have in fiction. We have young adult, we have music rap, we have fantasy, we have science fiction, young adult, and then you get into the nonfiction stuff, and we have the inspirational stuff, and of course the health thing, a health book that I wrote. So you can just kind of navigate and play whatever you want. The Star Child Comics has a tab as well. They can get the comic books through the site. You'll be able to buy all of the comics, some of the novels, and then for each novel that you're interested in, you'll be able to click on a link that will actually take you to Amazon if you want to pick it up in the ebook, audiobook, or paperback format.
Now, for those listening to the episode, when you look in the show notes, we're gonna have links to all those things. So just jump into the notes. You'll find the links to Braxton Cosby and everything else that you have. So make sure they do so. Hopefully, they check it out. So what's next for you?
Doing more publishing. We've got some great content coming out in the early 2025. Obviously, for me, I've got a book signing with Barnes and Noble for Broken. Finally, we got back into the stores. So I'll be doing a book signing for book one there on December 14th, 2024, right down here in Georgia, in Mahler, Georgia. If anybody's local wants to come through, pick up a copy and get it signed. Also, like I said, December 17th, which is next week, I'll be officially releasing the Cape to enter the Fabulous Five. So I'm really excited about that story. So that continues what we built so far. This is the official second entry into stage 4 of our stages of superhero series and fiction. We've got 6 authors contributed 18 novels, and now we've got over 6 comic books in there as well. Now with 7 would be with what we've done with Cape 2. And in the early part of the year, we've got manga. We are officially dropping our manga, although we have toyed around with manga already with Kaio Champion's ANVK, African Ninja Vampire Killers. That's manga. But we're also going to have our first big fighting robots series called Nexus Astrum. Anybody who's following us on Star Child Comics, you'll see a lot of our kind of teasers on that. We did the cover reveal, which was well received, and that is by author Chris McCauley. So far, so good. We're just going to keep pushing, and we're definitely going to more conventions next year. So we might pop up in a city near you.
Very good. Mr. Cosby, it's been an absolute honor to speak with you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Have a good night. Thanks for listening to another episode of Verna Stars Podcast. Please like and subscribe. Turn for the next episode when Winifred Phillips boards the mothership to talk the score to wizardry, proving grounds of the Mad Overlord. To the next voyage, travel on.